If you're a parent of a child under the age of 12, let me ask you a question. When is the last time, or even the first time, you let them walk to school by themselves, have an unscheduled play date, or, God forbid, let them go to the store to pick up a gallon of milk by themselves? Kids today are tagged, surveilled, and tracked like endangered species. Is it any wonder that our college campuses now rush to provide safe spaces and panic rooms to protect young adults from speakers and material which they might find disturbing?
Microaggression, cultural appropriation, offensive.
Kids are supervised all the time, and
to discuss the challenges in American childhood and what to do about them, I sat down with Lenore Skenazy, the author of Free Range Kids and a regular contributor to Reason. Skenazy is launching a new nonprofit called Let Grow, along with psychology professors Jonathan Haidt and Peter Gray, and Daniel Shuchman, who's the chairman of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. The organization will champion policies, research, and mindsets promoting childhood independence, autonomy, and resilience. Skenazy and Haidt make the case for Let Grow in the cover story of Reason Magazine's December issue, which is on sale now. What has changed and what defines American childhood now?
Kids are supervised all the time, and the idea of letting a kid out unsupervised has become so unusual that that's when people, when people see a kid walking outside, sometimes they call 911 because they don't know. I mean, should a child ever be unsupervised? And then the cops come and they don't know. Isn't that dangerous? So it's constant supervision of one sort or another.
In the story, you mention an incident where a kid was outside chopping wood.
Yeah, that's
right. And the police end up showing up.
Right, so a kid was outside chopping wood in a suburb of Chicago, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. He was in his teens, and a person walked by, saw the kid, thought, oh my God, a child, an axe, anything terrible could happen, called 911. The police came. Why do you have an axe? Why are you chopping wood here? And he's like, I wanted to build a fort. Me and my friends were going to build a fort. Well, the police confiscated the axe, and he had another tool, and they gave them to his parents for safekeeping. And to me, that's the land of Lincoln,
Right.
There's a history
so
of...
Abe Lincoln would have been picked up on the first of 12 miles he was walking to school.
That's
and
right,
put in the pokey until his parents came.
Right, or given a little extra homework and some reading or something that will really develop him, because chopping wood and building something and doing something with your friends and having any autonomy, all those are terrible. What's really important is a little more homework.
You've been writing about this for years now, calling attention to it.
Yeah.
And the story that got you started on this was when you let one of your kids ride the subway home in New York, which made you into the world's worst mom.
Right. First it made me America's worst mom, and then it grew.
Yeah. Now you're battling it out to be the world's worst mom on Mars and the gas giant planets. Tell us about what was that story, and why was that emblematic, really, of what you're talking about with Let Grow?
So I let my 9-year-old ride the subway alone because he'd been asking if he could do it, and we decided it was safe and smart and good because he was familiar with the subways, and so are we. We let him go. I wrote a column about it, and 2 days later I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR. And I got described as America's worst mom. I struggled with why for a long time, because whenever I was being interviewed by one of the TV shows or whatever, there'd come a point in the interview when the lady or the man would lean over and say, but Lenore, how would you have felt if he never came home? And I never had a good answer. I would say, oh, I have my spare son at home.
Yeah, your weekends would suddenly open up.
Yeah, really, less. I don't have to save for college. I mean, all sorts of, I never knew what to say. There was no good answer to that. And I finally figured out the reason there was no good answer is because it wasn't a question. How would I have felt? I think they knew. And so why were they asking? Because that was my crime. My crime was I didn't go to how terrible I'd feel if I let him ride the subway and somebody kidnapped him and then they raped him and they killed him, and if if only I'd been with him, it would have never happened. I won't let it happen. That's what you're supposed to do to be a good parent today, is go to the very darkest place first. I call it worst first thinking. Think of the worst case scenario first. Think about how terrible you would feel, how you could have prevented it if only you had been there, and therefore not let them do anything on their own. And that's what's describing childhood today. Never letting kids do anything on their own because of the fear that something terrible could happen, or that they will fall behind because I'm giving them free time, but they could have been in Mandarin. So there's the fear of children being raped, killed, eaten, and then there's the fear of them not getting into Harvard. and they're parallel.
And yeah, they're
possibly equal.
Yeah.
Right?
This is all happening against the backdrop of incredible safety for children as well. So discuss that. I mean, that one of the most bizarre things is that we're treating our kids more and more as kind of Fabergé eggs. Who can, you just can't let them out of your sight. They have to be in shrink wrap all the time, or bubble wrap all the time. And at the same time, the social reality is that children have never been safer.
I know. And sometimes when I say there's never been a safer time to be a child, people say that's because we're watching them all the time. It's like, but there's also never been a safer time to be an adult. I mean, crime is back to the level it was in 1963. The safety might be one of these ironic things that the safer you get, the safer you think it can be. I mean, now that we've almost eliminated all childhood dangers, the fact that anything bad could ever happen to a kid looms even larger. And to go back to Lincoln, why not? He had 4 children, and one of them made it to adulthood. And people didn't say, what a terrible dad. Oh my God, he's America's worst dad. They understood that children's fate was fate, right? That there were bigger forces at work than just whether we were watching over our kids enough. But nowadays we don't have that because almost everybody makes it. And so if somebody doesn't make it, or the fear of somebody doesn't make it, means that you must be watching all the time. And then the thing that worries me is that as much as we're walking with our kids and staying with our kids and driving our kids, now there's technology to watch literally every step they take. And did they get on the bus? And are they texting when they got there? And who are they emailing? And let me read their text. And you can see so much of your kid's life that's going to become the norm. How come you didn't know? So you're supposed to know literally everything that's going on in your kid's life. And you open by saying it's like universal parole. It's more like prison. You know, everything they do and say and eat and read is being supervised by somebody worrying about, is this going to hurt them?
In the article you mention a statistic which is stunning, that in a recent year, it's like a couple of dozen kids have been kidnapped by strangers.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I mean,
because that's the kind of paradigmatic fear, right? That
is totally,
your kid is going to end up on the milk carton, even though we don't drink milk out of cartons anymore. But it's that type of thing. But that's a completely phantom fear.
It is a phantom fear, but when you think about when the pictures appeared on the milk cartons, it was in the mid-'80s. And those children are now today's parents, and they grew up, when they put the kids' pictures on the milk cartons, it felt like every morning you were looking at a child who had been disappeared.
Right. And
nobody ever explained, by the way, 90% of those were children taken in a custody battle or runaways. Nobody explained that. And so it felt like children were being, as many as there were milk cartons in the world, those were children that were missing. And I feel like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children exploited us with that fear without ever breaking it down to the idea that stranger abductions are extremely rare. And the statistic I give in my book is if you wanted your kid to be kidnapped by a stranger, how long would you have to keep them outside unsupervised for that to be statistically likely to happen? Sort of like how many lottery tickets would you have to buy to be statistically likely to win? How many? How long?
Hundreds of thousands.
You're like the only one. Most people say, I don't know, 3 hours, 5 minutes. You're
you would have
annoyingly
to hang them
right.
out in the parking lots of go-go bars and things like
That's
that.
That's right, at 3 in the
even
morning.
Then you would have to work at it.
You would have to work on it because the guys who are going to go-go bars want the go-go girls, and they don't want your 7-year-old whiner. But maybe they want yours. Anyway, so let me tell you the answer. It's 750,000 years.
Wow.
You'd have to keep them outside, and after the first 100,000 years, they're not kids
they've
anymore.
aged out.
They've aged out, they're not really cute.
In the story, and Let Grow, you have Peter Gray, who is a phenomenal developmental psychologist who looks at the role of free play and unstructured play in mammals, including humans.
Right.
Jonathan Haidt, who is the author of The Righteous Mind, really interesting character, particularly in speech battles and kind of intellectual diversity on campus. What is the connection between the way we treat our kids as human veal, as kids, and then when they go to college? Is there a connection that you guys are making there?
There is a connection, and there's one of my favorite artifacts from our culture that I talk about in the Reason article is a question and answer that ran in Parents Magazine. And the question is, your child is old enough to stay home alone for a short while you run errands or whatever, and that's no problem. But now she has a play date coming over. Are you allowed to run to the dry cleaners while the friend is over? And the answer was, absolutely not. Are you crazy? What if there's a squabble? You want to be there to intervene. And to me, that's the Rosetta Stone for the connection between childhood and what we're seeing on campus, because you've been told that your child cannot handle even a spat with a friend without adult intervention because somebody's feelings could get hurt. And when you're instructed that way by the Bible of parenting, which is Parents Magazine, that your kids can't handle it, it's too traumatic, your job is to make sure that nothing ever rises to that level, then you kind of get to campus and nobody wants to be in an argument or hear anything that they don't want to hear, or if they are in an argument, they need to run to a safe space or protest the fact that somebody's saying something that's going to make them uncomfortable, because we've been taught as parents, we're not helicopter parents by nature, we've been taught that we must not trust our kids in any kind of human interaction. Only adults can handle these things for them. And they get to college and they haven't had, I mean, obviously they've had some arguments and they've had some free time, but they haven't had huge swaths of it like we did growing up or like any generation before us, where they had to argue and get mad and then realize, no, I want to keep playing. Okay, and hold it together, and then you start playing again and things get okay again. They don't know that things get okay again because they've never gotten to that point.
And that seems to be a key to what you guys are talking about, is resilience. That idea that, you know, life is kind of rough and tumble, and you know, and we're not talking about pathological stuff here. I mean, we're talking about just the scrum of everyday life, where you know, you get pissed, you get angry, you get disappointed, you have a triumph.
Right.
And you know, that seems to be what is missing, right? And we're designing childhood and young adulthood where resilience can't develop because you're never really confronted with that type of thing to overcome.
Right, and that's why Peter Gray's work is so important and why he's part of this Fab Four team. He writes about the importance of free play, and he points out that when you're in Little League, you got adults telling you when the game starts, when the game ends, is the ball in or out, who's playing what position, and when your turn is. Okay, you learn how to bat. I'll grant you that. But when kids are playing a game, first of all, they have to figure out what game they're going to play. And if they make up the rules, they have to explain it to each other. And if you have a bunch of different ages, well, the 12-year-old is going to throw it lighter to the 6-year-old because the 6-year-old, you know, you don't want to whomp them and you'll look like an idiot. So you're learning empathy and teamwork, and that you make the rules. That's democracy. I want to change the rules. Okay, what do you want to do? I want to play it backwards. Okay, let's decide on that. And if
And you're hanging out with kids of different ages as opposed to being stratified constantly.
Right. One of the things Peter Gray points out is that when you're with just the 8-year-old soccer team, all you can do is compete. You know, there's other 8-year-olds, who's the best? But when you're the 8-year-old with the 5-year-old, like I just saw my kid's friend she just dropped him off on the bus this morning, and there's two 7- and 8-year-olds who tuck in, who put the 5-year-old between them and put on his seatbelt, and they get to be, you know, they're 8, but they get to rise to the occasion. That's a little bit of maturity training. And then the 5-year-old doesn't want to keep crying on the bus because he doesn't want to look like a baby to the 7-year-olds. And we've taken all that out of their lives, and we've given them structured activities that teach them a skill, but not the skills that come naturally in play.
Right.
We've given them something, but we've taken away something that was always there until now, which is learning how to be a human by being around other humans and playing, because the drive to play makes you get along and get frustrated and then get along again.
It reminds me, when you were talking about Little League, of in the original Bad News Bears, which came out in 1976, the kids at the end, they're coached by an alcoholic, played by Walter Matthau. At the end of the season, they lose the big game, spoiler alert, but they come close and they drink beer at the end, like instead of champagne. But in the remake that was made a few years ago with Billy Bob Thornton, the coach is a recovering alcoholic who drinks near beer, and at the end they break out near beer, but they don't even drink it. This seems to kind of mark different stages of American childhood. How did it get this way? What are the causes? Because it's not the kids. Kids haven't changed. Its parents have changed. And as you were saying, we, we're both baby boomers.
Yeah.
We grew up in an era where, I'm thinking of, in 1979, I guess I was in high school, but there was a band called The Runaways with Joan Jett and Lita Ford. And, there was kind of a celebration of like kids just being out of control and unwatched and crazy. Not all a good thing. Obviously, there's problems with that. But, what happened? Why are we and Gen Xers also famously left alone by their parents? Their parents were too busy, getting divorced or doing drugs or getting on with life. How did we get this way?
One is the media. The media was not 24/7 when we were growing up, and of course there's nothing that the media likes more than the story of a stranger kidnapping a white middle-class child. And those get repeated through the drama shows, the CSIs, the Law and Orders. There was actually a Law and Order based on a 9-year-old wanting to take the subway alone. And but my son,
I take it he did make it home.
Well, he made it to school. Yeah, he didn't make it home. Anyway, there's a litigious society that we're floating around in. You start looking like a lawyer at everything. Wow, I could have sued for that. Wow, that's dangerous. Wow, I can't believe that. This tag, this zipper thing fell off. That could be a choking hazard.
My hoodie, my kid got strangled for 5 seconds with a hoodie on a playground slide. Right.
And I can't believe that the slide is to blame, the Park and Recreation Department is to blame, and the hoodie is to blame. We live in an expert culture. Experts like that Parents magazine are always telling you that you're not doing it right, and so they come up with this new level of perfection, and then you follow it, and then that's not good enough. They come up with some new level of perfection. You have to breastfeed for 6 months, 8 months, 8 years, forever. And then we live in a capitalist society, which I celebrate, but there's no easier dollar to get from any human being than the dollar of a parent who's afraid, and you could save them. So now there's all the monitors and stuff that you actually put on your baby, your healthy baby, home from the hospital in the crib. You put on this little sock, and it measures their heartbeat, breathing rate, temperature, movement, and blood oxygen level, which normally, hitherto, had been measured only if your child was in neonatal intensive care. But now that's a level of care that you're supposed to be, using with your healthy baby at home at sleep. So if you're not even allowed to let your kid be asleep at home, and finally you can relax and break out the near beer, parents are being driven crazy by this. And the overarching thing, and sort of to get back to your original idea that children are under parole, is this idea that we can control everything. We control so many things. You can control the temperature of your house from your car on your phone. And it feels like we can control literally everything our children encounter. And you start thinking that you are in complete control, and the idea of not being in complete control scares you. Because you could have. You could have been watching them on a map to see where they were going, and you weren't. And how come? And so this level of sort of godlike omniscience is one that parents are forced to take on, and it's driving them crazy, and it's driving their kids crazy. One of the reasons parents can't let go is that the old milestones are buried. My mom knew when you start school, when kids start school, you walk them to school the first day, and then they go, right? And then, at 8 or 9, you might be a latchkey kid, and that was okay. And then at 10, you might have a paper route, and at 12, you'd be a babysitter. And everybody thought that these were normal, acceptable milestones. And now, no, because they have to go to piano, or I have to be driving them, or the school won't let them be self-released until 5th grade. And so these milestones are buried. And so the one way to unbury them is to make it normal again for parents to let their kids do something. So the first Let Grow project is getting schools to have teachers who say to their kids, okay, today when you go home, ask your parents if you can do one thing that you feel you're ready to do that for one reason or another you haven't done yet. You could walk the dog, make dinner if you're in a dangerous neighborhood. You could go pick up your brother from soccer. You could get yourself ready and go to school in the morning. You could ride your bike to the library. Anything that we would have done literally without a second thought. And because the school is endorsing it, and because all the other kids are doing things, so you're not the only crazy parent, the parents generally let them do something. And from the limited times I've done this in some schools to date, the parents are almost unbelievably ecstatic at the project. It's like, look look, here he comes. Oh my God, she got the milk. Oh, this is my kid. She walked all the way. You're going to do it tomorrow. Parents don't remember, literally don't remember why they were so afraid to let their kid walk 3 blocks or wait alone at the bus stop, because now it seems so obvious. And this is my latest revelation, if you'll bear with it. It's I didn't understand why the parents would be so ecstatic about something so minor. But what I finally figured out is that it's actually deeper than that. I think it's that we all realize that as much as we're doing for our kids, at some point we will die. And our children will be there without us. And finally we have proof that that's going to be okay. So I feel like it's this profound thing that just is a school project, and it doesn't take any money, it doesn't take any class time, it doesn't take any preparation. So I think that trying to spread the Let Grow project in schools, which we're doing in 7 schools in Long Island now and 2 here in the city, New York, I think people are gonna look at that and go, our school can do that too. So there's the project. Another one, and this is Peter Gray's baby, is after school free play. All right, so we were just talking about all the stuff you get from play. You know, you solve disputes and you deal with, you know, being angry and not knowing what to do, and you organize yourselves. And yet after school, like at the school my kids went to, there was after school robotics and knitting and chess and this and that, but there was no chance for free play. So just offer that as an option and have the free play literally be free play. I want somebody in the corner who's like a lifeguard, who is, you know, going in if there's, you know, actual blood, or, you know, they have the EpiPen, right? But otherwise, they're not interfering. And we're going to try to get some schools, the first ones that are doing this anyway, a box of loose parts, which is PVC pipe and fabric and springs and tape and boxes, and so that they
tattoo rigs,
heroin, yeah, some needles,
heroin
needles,
yeah,
limited, and that way they have to share. Oh,
right, yeah.
Well, we're working on it. Anyways,
it's a bold vision.
Right. You gotta shock them, right? You gotta have a gimmick. Anyways, the idea is that kids will have a place where there's enough, like when my kids came home and I wanted them to go outside, there weren't other kids outside. So you can't really get a kid to go outside unless there's another kid outside. So this way you have, you know, a critical mass of kids. They're the different ages, like we were talking about. Maybe there's a box of junk, maybe there isn't. It's obviously a safe enough space that parents feel okay about letting them be there. And then it also gives parents something, you know, a place to keep them for 3 to 6. So it works for everybody, and it's cheap. It's like you have a couple of supervised, they could be high school kids just watching. So we're trying to get that underway. And then we're trying to get towns to become Let Grow towns, where they announce that, look, when we see kids outside, we will not arrest the parents. Imagine that, right? So they would pass the Let Grow Bill of Rights. Our children have the right to some unsupervised time. We have the right to give it to them without getting arrested. And you don't get rid of all the cops or Child Protective Services. You just enlist them in supporting kids outside as opposed to arresting the parents who let them play outside. And then we're doing some fun contests that have not started yet, but will be starting very soon. And one of them is Think for Yourself. And it's an essay contest trying to get kids to realize that, like one question is something like, tell us, write a thank you letter to the jerk who was wrong until you realized, oh, they had a point. Or talk about a time you had a big fight with a friend and how you got over it. Just to remind them, like, the Sturm und Drang of interpersonal relationships isn't the end of the world. It's the beginning of something fine, which is, you know, exchanging ideas, maybe taking some in, maybe arguing your point more forcefully, but nobody has to protect you from free speech and whatever you want to read or think about or talk about. And then finally, we have this one silly contest, because you know I love contests, which is asking kids to come up with the name of their favorite TV show or book or movie, imagining if their main character had been overprotected. And so it's like James and the Giant Peach cut into tiny little pieces so as not to pose a choking hazard. You know, that's just to get younger kids thinking about it like, wait a minute, you know, Tom Sawyer wasn't always with his mom. How come I don't have any adventures or freedom? So we just want to start breaking into the children's consciousness that they deserve the freedom that their parents had to read, think, feel, talk, run, and then helping parents realize that, you know, this fear has been shoved down your throats. It's not natural. It's put upon us by the marketplace and the litigious society, the experts or whatever, and you can
by ourselves.
Well, it becomes internalized, but it's a lot of these outside factors. I mean, wanting your child to be safe and grow up to outlive you is the natural thing. Thinking that you have to stand at the bus stop with them every day with the 5 other parents and the 5 other kids until the bus comes is not natural. That's superimposed.
We've been talking with Lenore Skenazy. She's the author of Free Range Kids. She's a contributor to Reason, and she, along with Jonathan Haidt, have the cover story in the December issue of Reason, which announces the Let Grow Foundation, an organization devoted to creating an atmosphere in which children can become independent and resilient and move into adulthood in a mature and productive fashion. Thanks so much, Lenore.
Thank you, Nick.
For Reason, I'm Nick Gillespie.